can see Nathan has started the recording again, which is good. It means she didn't record us talking about chocolate biscuits. So welcome back, everybody. Hope we've had a little bit of refreshment and ready to carry on. So the next item on the agenda, so we're up to item number 5. So this is our Highland Integrated Children's Service Plan, and Louise is going to speak to this one. So I will hand over to you, Louise.
Thank you. However, Tim is going to start us off.
Oh, I'm very sorry, Tim.
No, it's all right. I bet we're both down as on the cover sheet. Louise appears first, so that's only to be expected. Yeah, just introducing this paper. I'd also like to introduce hopefully a couple of guests who will be able to answer questions. Ian Kyle is here from the Highland Council. I also hope to have Tracy Gervais here, but I don't see her on the attendance list yet, but hopefully that's only a very short delay, and as you can see, she's the author of the covering paper. So I'd like to present the Highland Integrated Children's Services Plan for 2023 to 2026. It is a plan just for the Highland Health and Social Care Partnership area, and each health and social care partnership statutorily needs to have its own plan. The plan is brought here for discussion and for information. It's already been to the Highland Health and Social Care Committee and been approved there, and has also been to the Highland Community Planning Partnership Board and has been approved there. We've talked already in the board a lot about prevention and about what we can do around managing demand and keeping people healthy. And this is one of the major planks of doing that for the community in Highland, about giving everybody as good a start in life as possible. The plan is a partnership plan, but it's also based on a lot of work that has been done through the board. There's a link within the papers to the health needs assessment, children's health needs assessment, and this is also particularly referenced in the plan, which follows on from the covering paper, and that provides quite a considerable background around the needs and the basis for the plan, both in terms of general health needs and other needs, but also around needs that are particularly prominent or for particular groups. In general, we need to be aware clearly of the issues around rural isolation in remote and rural communities, which can be a particular issue for young people growing up with access to services as well as to school and friends. One particular issue which is becoming increasingly apparent, and board members will be well aware of, is child poverty. In many ways, as has been discussed before, we're talking about poverty in general rather than specifically about child poverty, but life chances are very considerably affected by poverty, by reduction in opportunities, and that's been heightened by issues around the COVID pandemic. So that really is quite a powerful background to the work of the plan. Particular groups of children and young people have particular needs. In general and in Highland particularly. We have talked previously at the board around corporate parenting, around the promise, the promise board, and children and young people who are care experienced, and there's still a lot of work, as was highlighted among the in the actions from a previous meeting earlier on in this board meeting, and the needs of care experienced children and young people and others is also highlighted within the plan. And then there are also services that we are responsible for that have a particular profile. Of course, within Highland we have the lead agency model, where the lead is taken by the Highland Council, but I think often when it comes to children's services we underestimate both the level of children's services that we actually provide, whether it be things like child and adolescent mental health services or NDAS, or the vast range of services that are provided within primary care, which are very often the first port of call for children and young people. So we have that as a role within the board, but we also have our statutory responsibilities and the plan. And the plan reflects that. There's still a way to go, both in terms of ensuring that the appropriate services are delivered and also ensuring that we've got the right arrangements for planning and for governance and for monitoring how everything is appropriately delivered. So the plan goes some way towards that, but we need to get, for example, better integration with our strategy, and we need to make sure that our board members are aware of progress and we've got the appropriate monitoring and reporting arrangements. Therefore, there is only moderate assurance requested for this report. However, it is good progress being made, and I think the progress was exemplified a few weeks ago at the launch event for the plan, which was held at Inverness Leisure Centre, and there was a huge range of stalls there, many from the board, showing services available, and a real buzz of activity around. And I think our challenge in the future will be to harness that buzz, that activity, so that we can get real change and real improvement for the health and overall well-being of young people within the Highland area. So I will open there for questions. I see that Tracy has arrived, so so we've had both Tracy, Ian, myself and Louise, and we're very happy to take any comments or questions on the paper.
That's great, thank you, Tim, and really great to see this coming to the board, and fantastic that colleagues have been able to join us too. And just to reflect on that event that you talked about, I've heard some really positive feedback about that launch event, so that was really welcomed. Okay, I will open up to the floor. Do you colleagues have any questions or comments that they would like to put to Tim or the others? Alistair, and then Pam. Alistair first.
Yeah, thank you. I welcome this document. I think it's a high-level document setting out a strategy. It's really useful. What would be helpful is, and I know there's a governance sheet at the back explaining a little bit the structure and everything, but in terms of evaluating as to whether the plan is a success or not, perhaps someone could just speak a little bit about the evaluation methodology, which of the committees it's going to come to. Are we going to take in also surveys of lived experience from service users? Because I think it would be useful just to get an idea as to how do we know this plan is working, it's making a difference, and it's doing what we say it's going to do. And I think that's always a concern of any plan, as to how you're going to judge it and evaluate it, and perhaps some commentary around that would be useful. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think perhaps if Ian kicks off just on in terms of a general answer to that, and then we can look further from a board point of view.
Thanks, Tim. Good morning, members. In terms of evaluating the plan, the plan is underpinned by a performance management framework, and that performance management framework is being brought together using some of the data that Tim referenced earlier in the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment that helped us identify the priorities for the plan. So there are a number of performance measures that sit within that performance management framework, and we've recently been undertaking some activity to match the pre-existing performance management framework from the previous plan with the measures that are within the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. So there's a paper going back to the next Integrated Children's Services Planning Board, just settling on the performance framework that we've got there. Your point in relation to voice and participation and capturing the voice of children, young people and their families is absolutely essential to the development of this plan. And what we have undertaken over the last 4 or 5 months is to properly develop a participation strategy so that we can use tools and find a mechanism for engaging the children, young people and families. We have characterised in our discussions at the board previously that sometimes that can feel a little bit ad hoc, and it's not necessarily essential in the way that it should be to as understanding. So we've done some work with the third sector around about that, and Inspiring Young Voices, which is a third sector organisation, is on behalf of the board taking forward the development of that participation strategy, which should see that voice more clearly articulated within the left end of this plan.
Thanks, and thanks, Ian. I think. Before I say any more, just hand over to Tracy for comments.
So certainly Ian's described, he's clarified, confirmed obviously the systems and process in place, but obviously further work needs to be done, how we can articulate and demonstrate we're improving outcomes for children and young people. So certainly again, that's something that with the members of the Integrated Children's Services Planning Board we will be working towards.
And I think also we need to make sure that we feed that back appropriately to the board, both in terms of board committees and this board. And I think it's important to recognise our very important to recognise our statutory responsibilities. We already have some children's issues within the IPQR, but I think we need to look more broadly about how we can incorporate that and make sure that we've got that sort of golden thread through to all the way from children's lived experience and actually genuine outcomes to the board. I think in some ways I'd certainly back up, and they expect me to back up what's been said about outcomes within the JSNA, but like many outcomes, they do take a long time to change. So we need to make sure that we know what's happening in the short term. And I think Louise probably wants to come in to give some comment.
Thanks, yes, and I think it's a real opportunity now for us to look at how we effectively do integration, given that we've got the majority, but not all, children's services in the Highland Council. But we're obviously, as we've referenced this morning, we've got CAMS and the joint work around NDAS. So I think it's a real opportunity that we've got to grasp about how we do this effectively, how we not just measure it, but how we actually evidence it to the people that matter most, so the communities and the families.
Thank you to everybody for that team effort answer. And you were getting lots of nods there, Tim, when you were talking about that reporting and that golden thread. So it looks like members are keen to see that progress. Pam, I'll bring you in. And sorry, Pam, I probably should have brought you in first. I wasn't sure if you wanted to pop in beforehand, but I'll bring you in now.
I've changed my mind about half a dozen times now what I want to say. I suppose just to acknowledge that whilst the formal public sector services are in the the Council for Children's Services. There's a lot of children's services delivered by third sector and independent sector, so we really need to make sure that we talk about our partnership in the widest sense. I think in terms of the governance, to go back to Alistair's comment, it's a really complex landscape, and the kind of direction comes through community planning for the integrated children's services plan, and that's where it gets approved, and that's right, because of the level of intervention that comes from all parties involved around a child. And we've been discussing across the partnership arena, so how do we make this robust but simple, so that we haven't got people reporting the same thing 100 different times, just to satisfy lots and lots of different parts of a system. How do we make that work in a way that makes sense and gives that robust governance and around it? Because we've also got the Chief Officers Group, where the accountable officer responsibility is in the Ministers for Children's Services around public protection and child protection. There's a whole load of governance groups. I think the bit that we as a board need to be really interested in is what's already been stated, our statutory duties as a board, make sure that we're fulfilling them either independently in the things that we have to carry out, or in partnership with our key care partners in the delivery for those outcomes for children. And I think the bit that maybe is that we need to think about as well in that integrated space is through the lead agency arrangements, what are our duties there that are different from our duties in that wider community planning arena? So I think at the moment we're trying to kind of make a little bit more sense of that, and community planning has now got robust support and administration in place, coordination, and the lead coordinator there's having a look at this as well. So it is something that we're trying to I suppose strengthen, Alistair, to come back to your question, but and hopefully we'll have something that maybe sets that out a bit more clearly as we go forward, because at the moment we do have an awful lot of multiple reporting, which for the likes of Ian and Tracy and others, I'm sure can feel never ending. So we want to address that, but certainly from a board perspective, it's ensuring that we're playing our part as a key care partner, but also meeting our duties, and that coming through our committee structures to the board is going to be important. And I think, just as Tim has alluded to, and I think Tracy, maybe not in this arena, said before, we need to make sure we've got children's services high on our agenda. And again, that takes us right back to prevention, early intervention. They're the adults of the future. What we do now with them will determine what we're dealing with in the future as a health system.
Thanks, Pam. Okay, I've got a few other people with hands up who'd like to come in, so I'm going to bring Anne in next, please.
Thanks, Sarah. So I too have heard very positive reports about the event, the launch event for the plan, and I was very sorry to miss it. So, but it's great to hear that that was a very successful event. My question is probably more directed towards Tracy. So again, I was pleased to see that our public health colleagues supported the needs assessment that underpins a lot of the plan. I just wondered what challenges or indeed opportunities, if there are any, but usually these days it's challenges, that strategic needs assessment might pose for our health children's services, Tracy, and whether that flagged up any specific issues for us to work on quickly. Thanks.
Thank you. So certainly in terms of the joint strategic needs assessment, which I led on behalf of the Integrated Children's Services Planning Board, certainly there's key data intelligence, which obviously we need to give further consideration. We need to take that deeper dive. But certainly in terms of the strategic needs assessment, we've adopted a life course approach, and we have started from pregnancy and birth, and looking outward that most other GSNEs start actually from birth rate. And certainly we've engaged and we've discussed the maternity business case with the board members, and certainly our aspirations in terms of obviously supporting those pregnant mothers with complex needs in terms of the public health role of the midwife, and again how we work with our statutory partners in terms of early intervention and prevention. Certainly has been touched on, certainly child poverty is increasing, and that is a significant concern for all services, all statutory partners. But essentially we need to look at what we as an NHS board, as NHS can provide to those vulnerable young families. And certainly we've got a number of mechanisms, interventions in place, and examples would include the Neonatal Expenses Fund and promotion of the Best Start grants. And certainly through our health visitor pathways, there's key contacts when we can engage with the families. Teenage pregnancies was also identified within the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. Certainly the numbers are falling, but certainly more preventative activity needs to happen to enable and support these young people. But certainly in terms of our sexual health services, I'm pleased to say that in terms of the live chat service that's been operating for a couple of years now, we've had a 300% increase in engagement from young people. 80% went on to make an appointment. 50% had never attended the service before, and more than 50% are from rural and remote areas. In terms of challenges, I think our geography and our demography is certainly a challenge about how do we provide services to particularly those that don't reside within Inverness or just out with. So I think, again, that's probably some of our challenges where we need to explore where we can provide our services, particularly for those areas of deprivation where there are vulnerable population groups. It's quite a large topic, I would say, Anne, and one that probably we would need to discuss further if given more time. But certainly I'd be more than happy to engage to support the board or board members at any point in time in and around this.
Thank you, Tracy. We'll see, you might regret that depending on how many people email you after this. Thank you for that, Alpha. That's really helpful. Okay, I've got Jerry next, please, and then Gaynor after that.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, we had a good discussion on the plan at the Health and Social Care Committee a week or so ago, and I'll maybe just raise one of the points, and I know Ian will be able to answer this because he answered it very well last week. And Councillor Burt, one of the councillors on the committee, raised the issue of obesity levels and nutrition, and the absence of that being explicitly mentioned in the plan. And I think it was that explicit mention of it Councillor Burt was looking for. And I think it's implied in lots of places, but it'd be useful just to hear from Ian again on that. And probably my second point is really, I think it's an observation rather than the question. I think it ties in very much with Alistair's. How do we know, how will we know when we get there, and has it been a success? Sort of that. Fortuitous or not, we've got the annual performance review later on in the agenda, and you can see very clearly from the data presented in there that there's quite a few significant delivery challenges currently across the board. But I'm not picking on the allied health professionals, they're just the ones I've written down on my notes, but NDAS, etc., could be was. And I just wondered where the current baseline of performance is reflected in our starting point for our strategic aspirations. It's right that a strategy should be aspirational and it should be challenging, but it's actually, what assumption have we made about actually getting to where we should be in terms of that overall level of performance that as a minimum we would regard as satisfactory? So I don't know if that's an observation or a question or something to ponder on and discuss further, but thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you, Jerry. Don't know if anybody wants to come back on the pondering.
Well, can I just come back on the first of all on the nutrition, and I think an issue appropriately raised by Councillor Burt, who, as many people will know, is has been a director of public health in the past and is passionate around nutrition. I think we need to. It's an important issue for children, it's an important issue for adults, and of course it's the adults who determine what nutrition, generally speaking, the children get. So I think it needs to be seen as a part of a holistic nutrition policy, as people say, sort of from farm to fork. It does need to be included, it does need to be prioritised, but prioritised generally, I think, as a particular as a cross-cutting theme. We all the way from infant feeding, breastfeeding, through school nutrition, as well as what's available in supermarkets. So I think we will no doubt return to that on numerous occasions, generally speaking, when it comes to prevention. But I think it's right to highlight that as an issue for the children's plan, but it's a general societal issue. And I think in terms of aspiration and where we go for actually delivering, I think it is part of our overall assurance and governance, and I think it's something that we need to be that's again we need to be clearer on. I think that it's something that I think we ought to return to the board with about how we can actually be a bit more certain around where we want to go and be sure around how we're going to get there. I think we are well on the way, but I think we need to be a little bit perhaps bolder and clearer in what we're looking to achieve.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I have got Gaynor next, please.
Thank you. Thanks. I really welcome the new plan. It seems to set out very clearly where we want to get to and how we're going to get there. And I also welcome the drive to look at measurable outcomes. I think that's really important to be able to say what we've actually done. I think the joint strategic needs assessment is really interesting, and I agree with Pam that we need to look at the wider partnership, including the third sector, and delivering on this. Having been involved in the past in championing the voice and participation of children and young people in policy practice, I'm really pleased to see that we're moving that way more and more. And my question really is, for children and young people and their families, how are we going to articulate this plan to them in a way that's understandable? Thanks.
I wonder whether, first of all, Ian might be able to pick this one up.
I was just going to say Ian might be the best person for this.
It's one of these. It's kind of don't get me started, I guess. But in terms of measuring outcomes, I think we've almost got to remember that this is, in fact, the 6th iteration of the Integrated Children's Services Plan, each of which has had a performance management framework sitting below it. So the data that we have is actually, a lot of the data that we have is actually established over time and shows us a picture over time. I think the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment has highlighted a number of facets of that, which actually show the extent to which we're meeting the outcomes and working towards meeting the outcomes. Particularly focusing around the voice and participation of children and young people. I think I referenced earlier on the participation strategy that we've got, but actually what we've been doing more recently, and part of what's included in this iteration of the plan, is the approach that we're taking, community-based whole family wellbeing approach. And there's actually, through the Community Planning Partnership, a programme has been established with Scottish Government money for whole family wellbeing, and that programme is supported by a partnership programme lead, a programme manager, and is actually supported by 6 locality coordinators. The aspiration of that programme is really to reduce the inequalities that are within our Highland population, improving that cohesion and that coordination and that collaboration, and particularly getting alongside families in a way that we haven't done before. I think across services, our focus has quite largely been on children, and quite rightly so, on children and young people and their and the outcomes. But we've got to remember that most of our universal services are delivered in community spaces, and actually shining that lens on family is absolutely fundamental to this, because first and foremost, children live in the context of families. So I think the development of that programme through the acceleration of the plan is really, really welcome. And the fact that we're taking a place-based approach to that also recognise the inequalities in Highland life, and that not all communities are the same, and sometimes their analysis of the gaps are something of a challenge. And I think particularly one of the aspirations of this whole family wellbeing programme is to do something that we haven't done before, and that is not just to get alongside families better, but actually stay with families for as long as they need it. A lot of our interventions can quite often be can just as going in and things have gone wrong for families, but actually the aspiration that we get alongside families at a point of need and that we stay with them is something that really is quite fundamental to that, and it's something that we've done well enough in the past.
Thank you, Ian. That was really helpful. Okay, good. I'm not seeing any other hands up. So just to recap what the ask of the board was here, we were being asked to note the position, discuss the report's content, which we have done, and to take moderate assurance from what's been presented. I'll just do a quick pause to make sure that everybody is happy with that and nobody is proposing otherwise. Great, thumbs up, lovely. And just a particular thank you to Ian and Tracy for coming along today to help us go through that paper. That's really appreciated. Thank you. Okay, so next we are on to item number 6. This is our leadership and culture programme, and I'd like to invite Gareth to speak to this paper, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present an update to the board on the work we've been doing over a number of years in relation to leadership and culture. The paper, there's a lot of detail in the appendix, but summarised in the cover paper are the key points for providing moderate assurance to the board in relation to progress and plans going forwards from here, following a period of reflection on the work that's been done over the last few years to address issues raised during the period of the historic report, the healing process, and other activities. So just to note that a significant amount of work has been done, and there's a summary in the appendix showing the progress to date, including the conclusion of the healing process, and the board received an update or a stop date report on 20th June last year, 2022. And we followed a period of reflection up until this point to review what's worked well, what's had the most impact, where are gaps, there are areas we need to strengthen, and where do we need to move forwards in terms of the priorities for the future. We recognise that the developing our culture is an ongoing commitment for the board and is never complete. So there's a range of activities we'll continue to pursue. And there's an ongoing commitment from the board. The cultural oversight group that has been meeting during the period of time of reflection, we met again over the summer to review the progress to date has been critical in terms of engagement with a wide range of staff. We've also gone through the area partnership forum and further discussions with the executive team, and we've had conversations around the board table as well. So there's been a lot of reflection in terms of what where we should go next, and that is then summarised into the recommendations which have been approved by the Area Partnership Forum, Staff Governance Committee, and are coming to the board for to provide moderate assurance. So this, the direction of this is split into 2 elements: the direction of travel going forwards, and then some specifics which I'll go into in a minute. So the revised structure for governance and delivery of our approach will be 3 interrelated components: a leadership and culture programme, which will have the oversight and governance of that will be provided by the Culture and Oversight Group, terms of reference of which have been updated and revised to strengthen the strategic leadership on that group whilst maintaining wide engagement across staff side and our partners across the organisation. This will focus on a refreshed leadership and culture framework, We also then have the annual delivery plan, which details a range of workforce related actions, which will also flow through governance, through the staff governance committee, and will provide updates to culture oversight group, because these are complementary to the leadership and culture framework. And these will focus on, for example, strengthening our recruitment processes, including onboarding, looking at how support we have around health and well-being, and our approach to diversity and inclusion. So these are all elements I'm accountable for delivering through our workforce plan and the annual delivery plan. And then lastly, to note that performance management, as noted through the IPQR, discussed at this board meeting today, is our existing process for overseeing the key performance indicators that map to the staff governance standards and existing staff governance arrangements, which are within the remit of staff governance committee and our organisational performance framework. So the purpose of setting out those three elements is to be very clear about where these sit in relation to our governance and the focus for each for the cultural oversight group going forwards. Which leads me to the next element, is laying out clearly the focus for our work. We've done, as noted in the update, there's a range of development work that's been undertaken to strengthen support for culture and for our leadership. The aspects we're going to focus on going forwards will be a refreshed approach to our leadership and management development programme, particularly looking at enhancing our relational, technical, management skills and the modules within that programme, with a real focus on where we need to strengthen relational skills, particularly in relation to subjects such as compassionate leadership. We also recognise that culture is everybody's responsibility. So there's an element of reviewing our staff development programme and looking at what we might need to do to strengthen the cultural dimensions of our induction and personal development programmes. For example, having courageous conversations, that's something that is particularly important for a line manager to be able to do, but is also important for relationships between individual members of staff as well. So it's emphasising the importance for us all having responsibility and how we support the learning development of all of our staff. This will then be supported by strengthening our learning system. So we will deliver formal training through the staff development and leadership management development programmes. But we're looking at where we can expand our lasting capability for coaching and mentoring, delivering masterclasses on particular subject areas, for example, compassionate leadership, developing leadership networks for peer support so that leaders can work together to learn what from each other, how they've applied the knowledge that they've acquired through the training programme and put it into practice, for example, through action learning sets. And we'll also look at developing the project-related support to run staff conferences and learning sessions, which are an opportunity to bring together in a concept of all teach, all learn, where we're learning about what strengthens our culture, what contributes to that, and how can we all work together in that space. So a lot of information for the board to digest, but those are the key points I wanted to pull out. And the diagram on the third page articulates the structure of that framework going forwards. We are also looking at the implementation plan at the moment, so that's currently with our learning and organisational development team in terms of how we will then plan out the delivery, both in terms of developing the modules that need strengthening within our programme, leadership and development programme, and also how we'll prioritise delivery across the organisation, because this is a significant task for an organisation that has around about 900 managers across the whole organisation. So long term, we want to reach every part of the organisation, and it's how we do that and focus on the areas that we really need to in the short term to have an impact where required. So presenting to the board for moderate assurance, based on the fact we have clear steps for our programme, but we also have further required work to really flesh out the details in terms of the delivery plan and the timescales for doing the work required to strengthen the programme and deliver it. I'll pause there.
Thank you, Gareth. That was a helpful summary. I really enjoyed reading this paper, and I just wanted to take a minute to recognise all the work not only that's gone into this refresh, because it's not just something that's happened overnight. I know there's been a lot of work to bring this to us today, and also the work that's been happening over the last few years has been immense. And I suppose just to say what we always say about this, it's not going to be done and it's not going to be quick. It's something we need to keep working at. And I think that's why I was really pleased to see this refresh come to the board. And I really liked, I can't remember what page it was of, but the questions about, you know, well, from our journey so far, what bits are working well? Where do we want to focus our energies? Which bits do we need to tweak? And I think this is a really good time for us to be doing that. I'll open up to the floor. Do people have questions, comments, observations for Gareth on this refreshed approach? Okay, great. Philip, I'll bring you in.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Gareth. It's good to see the next steps that we're embarking on after the success of the previous work we've done. What I was unclear about, then there's a part in the financial information that says any financial implications will be developed. I just wondered, do we have any early sight of any potential increase in investment which is required to deliver this proposal?
In terms of the position we're in, I think is to maximise the resource we have already, make sure we're using that as best we can, given the conversations we've had earlier in the session around our financial position as well. So I think the learning system is also an element of how do we make best use of the resources. So in terms of being able to deliver sessions for staff with the existing resource, with the people we've got in place, basically, can we do that in a more efficient, effective way through learning sessions, masterclasses, etc. So I think the key point from this is, where possible, we're going to minimise the impact of any additional financial resource requirement, and as in line with anything else, as we start to develop options around this, it will come down to a cost benefit analysis and discussion for us in the executive team and elsewhere. And that's the case for I suppose my role, to clearly articulate, if we're going to invest further, what's the benefits we're going to get from that in terms of maybe accelerating progress, targeting particular areas, and what the benefits of that will be. Because again, not noting the points that we've made, is we have the capacity to be able to deliver this over a number of years. That we do have that already. We've strengthened the investment in the team. I think the challenge will be about where we want to, if we want to accelerate anything or increase the pace of anything, we'll need to think about increasing the resources attached to it. So I think it's an open question at the moment, and I think given our financial situation, it's really got to be done as proposals come out. But my focus would be about how we set out clearly the plan for delivering within our resources initially, and then if we think we need any additional resource to accelerate, that would then come forwards for discussion.
Thanks for that, Gareth. Do you have a timescale for when we may see some kind of figures attached to proposals?
So I think what we will do in the first instance is we'll bring forward the plan for what we will deliver within our resources that we currently have, and we'll give some indication of it if we think there are further proposals, because at this point I'm not committing to saying we actually are going to invest further. I think what we need to give assurance to the board is we have a clear plan for how we use the current resources. So I would put it in that position at the moment, rather than saying there'll be a timescale for coming forwards for additional resource requirements, if that's okay.
Thanks for that.
Thanks, Gareth. Okay, I've got a question that's kind of linked, but I'll bring in others first, and then I'll come in with my question at the end. I've got Elspeth next, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's more a comment than anything. I don't have any questions, obviously, because I've been fully engaged and involved with this for over the past number of years. It's just really to thank Gareth for the focus that he's actually placed on this since he's come into post. The refresh was really we'd been waiting for it for some considerable time, because it had gone, there had been a bit of a lull. It was just really to note the engagement that has been happening throughout the organisation, and what we need to do going forward is to sustain that. I'd like to bring to the attention of the board that the fact that we have refreshed those partnership networks for staff. Some are more I suppose what we could say is that some are more have been in place longer than others, but we do need to encourage that leadership and ownership around this, because it's everybody's business. It's not just our staff side colleagues around this that are pushing this. This is actually a focus for everybody. So it was just to say that, you know, the movement is welcome, and actually I look forward to actually seeing some of these actually building more of a momentum than has currently happened over some time. Thanks.
Thanks, Elspeth, and that's really helpful actually to get your perspective on the paper and on the process as well. So thanks for adding that in. Pam, did you want to come in on the back of Elspeth's?
I will do then. Yeah, just to echo, I think the focus that Gareth has been able to bring to pulling together all the discussions that we've had over a number of months now in terms of what that next phase looks like. It's really excellent work. And just to support that, we've talked about being much more strategic in the deployment of the resources we've got. And so I think to support Gareth in his recommendation that we need to be clear that we've got that in the right place and we're using that well, before we consider whether there's going to be a bigger impact by adding in any additional resource. So I think that's the space we're in. I think that's, again, a good challenge back in to the system about, you know, we can be busy doing lots of things, but if we're not seeing the fruits of those efforts, then you have to ask, are they the right things?
Absolutely. Thank you, Pam. Graham, I'll bring you in next.
Gareth, we've talked over the years about the importance of trying to support and strengthen middle management, the people who are delivering at local level, and you've referenced how challenging that is in the geography, with the geography and such like, and I like some of the ideas you've suggested that might help get around that. But I'm also aware that the pressures on a lot of the services just now is leading to a lot of people who we might not have traditionally seen in kind of leadership roles, but in fact are having to emerge as leaders, whether that's admin staff in local health services, or the kind of paramedics out in the front, or the people dealing with emergency duty departments. You know, it just seems that there's the need for people to be supported and strengthened in these leadership roles is it just seems so important for us to be able to develop the service. And I just wonder how what your thoughts are on that kind of area, and any thoughts you may have on how we move forward with supporting these people.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful point, and helps bring out one of the, I suppose, strong convictions I have, which is that we need to talk about leadership very much earlier in people's career development. I think the focus, my experience, certainly personal experience around this, has been that approaches going back in the past would have been that we sort of talk about supervisory training or first line management training as opposed to leadership training from the off. And I think there's a bit about actually recognizing that leadership happens as soon as you start to manage other people. And I can reflect on maybe the mistakes I've made in early days of my career, which maybe have been ameliorated if I'd had a little bit more of this, the relational skills thrown into the training, as opposed to the, I suppose, more technically focused aspects that have been traditional, shall I say, in the past.
We all can, Gareth, we all can.
Indeed. So I think that's the premise, that's the principle. How we do that, I think, is by changing the construct of the modules, so we enhance it. The challenge then comes back to the scale of the organisation and how you change that. So I suppose there's an element of this will take quite a period of time to filter through, but the commitment will be that we have it in the structure, and we can go forwards with that. And I think it's also about empowering our staff to work together, and I think that's where all teach all learn type sessions can help, because they can drip feed into the the sort of organisational dialogue, for want of a better expression, where it gets the conversation going about what makes a difference. And people can pick that up relatively straightforwardly in these sessions. So it's something I've pinched, if you like, from quality improvement and how we do things in quality improvement at a national level, but also locally. That can be, rather than the formal taught training elements of it, people can get so self-motivated by listening to other people's experiences and thinking, I could do that, I can put it into my practice.
Thank you, Gareth. Okay, Bert, I'd like to come in next.
Thank you, Chair. Not a great deal to add, really. No questions, but just some comments and observations. I've been involved in the work over a period of time. We paused for a number of months, and I think it was the right thing to do, to reflect on where we were. But there's a lot been going on in the background, and you can see from the paper that's been brought forward today where we have now got to. I think it offers us some positive outlook for the direction of travel that is in there. I'm particularly pleased to see the focus on the leadership aspect, and I think it was Graham that mentioned a moment ago about middle management. I've spoken a lot about this, as have others, and I think it's a really key aspect of how we take things forward. It is, of course, work in progress. It'll take a long time, and it's work that it will never finish. And I think we would all understand that. The Culture Oversight Group will continue to play a really important part in all of this. But the only other thing I would add is that when I do all of my visits around the board area, people tell me that they don't see the difference that is being made. I think there's an opportunity here to make a difference, but we need to communicate that across the board area to staff at all levels so that they can see the results of that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Bert. And Gareth, before I bring you in, actually, I might kind of throw my question in because it's not directly linked, but it kind of links with the comms around this, I guess. So obviously there's communicating our refreshed approach, which is, you know, something in and of itself, and then picking up Bert's point around comms, you know, as a way of getting that message out there and helping the effects to be felt throughout the organisation and helping that sort of percolation of what it is that we're seeing in some places, some really good stuff. And my question is about comms, but it links back to, I guess, Philip's question a little bit, is that all of this stuff that you've outlined in the paper is absolutely the right thing for us to be doing, and I can see how we've got to that point, and these, you know, the stuff around the leadership development, and that's really, really important. And I'm mindful of the challenge and the limited capacity, and how do we balance these things that we've outlined as actions we need to take with, I suppose, what I would call the bread and butter stuff, so the appraisals, the return to work interviews, the Statman training. And it kind of is picked up, I guess, in the sorry, I'm just trying to find the page, that the third bit where it's, you know, it's about managing performance management through staff governance standards and existing staff governance arrangements. So I guess my question is, in the communication of this, how do we make sure that people are embracing these new things or these elements that we know are going to be helpful in shifting where we've been, but also not forgetting the fundamentals and the importance of those fundamentals? That's a very long-winded way of asking my question, sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's a good set of points to pick up. I wanted to just reflect the relatively new person into the organisation that there's, and having been out on the patch. So I don't for a minute, I'm not challenging what Bert's saying at all. And I think there's a mixed picture in terms of what we hear. And when we're out, we hear good stories and we hear not so good stories. And I suppose that's probably, from my experience across working across many boards, is probably reflective of most boards, that you'll go and find some things that are good and some things that are not so good. I suppose what I'm reflecting on is, are we doing enough to articulate and talk about the things that are going well and share experiences where things are going well as acknowledge where we've got to improve? So that's probably an open question for us all to think about. It's based on, I suppose, my thinking and principles around what we call appreciative inquiry, that an organisation tends to move in the direction of what it studies. So if it's studying positive things, it will move towards those positive things. If we always go back, so I suppose the practical thing is, if you ask somebody what their problems are, you will certainly get a long list of problems, and that's fine. But also, if you go into a place, which I have done since I've started here, a number of different places, including Campbelltown, the NTC, Guildford, and said, what are you most proud about? What do you enjoy about your job? Then you will get a very different response. And I suppose it's just that element of balancing the two. And I think we do have an opportunity for telling some positive stories for the organisation that people can also learn from. So that comes into probably a longer term communications plan about how we use things like I Matter stories and others to sort of to influence the dialogue, the organisational dialogue. I think the approach does have to be segmented in terms of the comms approach. So we need to be clear about what we're doing from an organisational support perspective. And I think that's the focus of the paper today. And the other aspect is, as you say, is the fundamentals. It's the things that are good staff governance that we should be doing. And again, I also think they need to be communicated. There's a different way there's several layers of approaching that. One of them is that broader communication of why it's important to do these things. But I also think it comes back to targeted plans around particular things, and then accountability for that. So if I use an example that will flow through staff governance shortly, is our statutory manager training. So there's an element of improving our reporting on that, and one of the proposals that I will be taking forward is the format of the reporting, so that we have essentially named managers in reports, and it's structured in a way that it gets to the heart of, actually, this is where you are at, and this is where you need to improve in terms of your statutory manager training. So it's about different techniques of putting it back to the people that are responsible for this and making sure that actually we are actually reinforcing those key messages. So statutory manager training is a really good example of that, and that will flow through staff governance in due course in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of improving accountability. So hopefully that answers your question in terms of, I think it's multifaceted.
Thank you, Gareth. Before I bring Pam in, Bert, can I just check, are you okay with that?
Yes, I mean, I acknowledge the point that Gareth has made. There are positive stories out there as well, and we need to have a balanced understanding of that. But I think as we move forward, we do need to give very careful consideration as to how we're going to do the communication. But other than that, Chair, yes, I'm fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Bert. Okay, I'll bring Pam in next, please.
Okay, so I guess a lot of this is about how we continue to be and how we build the expectation, because you can communicate and tell people this is what you want to do, but until you get that accountability in and that ownership and people speaking about it, then they perhaps might not naturally take the ownership the way we want them to. The bread and butter tool that we've already got in place is the performance management framework that we started implementation of over a year ago. And you see it coming through now from an operational perspective. When we do our sector reviews, a key element is the staff measures, and so building up and making sure we've got the right measures in there. And we have been building on that, and knowing that PDP's been happening, knowing that the appraisals have been happening, it should be a key part of the measures. So if we expect leaders and managers to report on that, and they're held to account on that, they will start to see that as business as usual and get used to that. And then I think the wider aspects will come through as Gareth says, a multifaceted approach, but we do have rigour in our performance management framework that now has a strong expectation that people don't just, so Catherine doesn't just come and talk anymore about the 4-hour target. She tells us exactly what the journey is with her staff, and we've had those spotlights in staff governance, and that is a hugely different position from certainly my experience since I've come in here. So I think building on that, people will gain as that gets more and more embedded and more normal for the organisation, because it's about, this is stuff that we should all be doing. So making it more normal, and part of that bread and butter will be an anchor in making sure that this becomes the norm and valued within the organisation. It doesn't take away from the challenge of how you fit it all in, but then that should be part of the discussion, because not doing it probably gives us lots of inefficiency.
Yeah, thank you, Pam. Okay, no other questions or comments that I can see coming up. So just to recap there, we were being asked to agree the proposal that we've seen today. Obviously, lots more work to be done, but agree that shift and where we're going, and take moderate assurance from what's been presented today. Just pause, make sure everybody's happy with that. Great, thumbs up. But no rest for you yet, Gareth, I'm afraid, because you've got 2 more items coming up. So we've got our whistleblowing annual report at 7A, and then we've also got our whistleblowing Q1 report at 7B. They are 2 separate items, but I'll leave it for you if you want to take them chunk by chunk, or if there's a benefit to kind of discussing it together. So I'll let you decide.
Thank you, Chair. I think what I'll focus on is the whistleblowing annual report, because the features in that are very much replicated in the Q1 report as well. So, in terms of, this is our 2nd annual whistleblowing report. It's been to the Staff Governance Committee for discussion, and it will be going to the Integrated Joint Board tomorrow. And as set out, there are requirements as mandated by the independent national whistleblowing officer in terms of what we need to put in the report. I think the key things that are to pull out from the findings are that the 5 concerns closed in the period all related to patient safety and quality. 1 was upheld, 2 partially upheld, and 2 not upheld. But it's important to note we are continuing to learn from all the concerns raised. The board has had a pause and reflect session in relation to whistleblowing and how we've been running it over the last 2 years, and that was very productive. Similarly, there was precursor to that in terms of the executive team also discussing where we could strengthen things, and that's summarised in the cover paper in relation to, we need to focus on improving our administrative processes, so we're better at tracking and monitoring the progress of investigatory reports. We need to focus on the tracking of recommendations that are more broadly applicable to the organisation resulting from any whistleblowing reports. We also want to look at the approach to triaging and making sure that where appropriate, concerns are directed into business as usual processes such as clinical governance or maybe HR, depending on that. And that triage process will be with myself, Louise as nurse director, and Boyd as medical director. I've not detailed that explicitly in this update. We've got a further action plan that's will flow through to staff governance following discussion at the last staff governance committee, and providing more detail of the improvement plan we will follow through to enhance our approach. And that includes looking at the role of our confidential contacts and how that's currently provided through the Guardian service. So I'll pause there because there's a lot of information in the report itself. I'm happy to take questions, but the main points are providing moderate assurance that we have considered our whistleblowing processes. We've identified areas of improvement. We've got a further detailed plan that will come through in terms of providing the detail for the board, for the governance committees and the board on that will move that in terms of from moderate to substantial. That will be the aim in terms of the action plan.
Thank you, Gareth. I will invite questions, comments. I don't know, Bert, did you want to say anything on these? Right, open up.
Thank you, Chair. Not a great deal to add, really. I think Gareth has covered it. You know, I've said continually we're on a journey, and I very much believe that is the case. It's the same as the culture thing. I think as far as the report is concerned, the annual report is concerned, we have been required to include information this year that we didn't have to do last year. That's been provided to us, and we've complied with that. So it's all in the report there. The board may want to take a view on what the figures are telling us. You know, five concerns raised during the reporting period. What does that tell us? 1 was upheld, 2 partially upheld, 2 not upheld. You know, whistleblowing should be the last option, really, for raising a concern. So the figures may be telling us that any concerns that people have got have been dealt with properly through business as usual. But you can interpret this, you know, in a number of different ways. I think the things that we've done in terms of scrutiny has been good. We've had an audit, and we've also had our pause and reflect session, which I think was a really important thing to do. And you know, we need to move forward with what came out of the pause and reflect. But other than that, Chair, I've nothing to add at this time. But I'm happy to take questions along with Gareth. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert. And just to echo that, I think that pause and reflect workshop that we did was really, really helpful, really important. And again, similar to what we just said about the culture stuff, it felt like the right time to do that. I think that was a really useful exercise for us to do as a board. Just a question I had, I think this did come through when we had our workshop, but it's important enough to talk about it again just now, I think, is I'm really interested in what we do with the learning. So whether it be that something does end up being classified as a whistleblowing event, and they'll be learning from that. But even when something isn't necessarily whistleblowing, but comes in, you know, through that route, maybe initially, there will be learning from that as well. But I'm also mindful that we'll be gathering information from all kinds of places. Obviously, we have the DATEX system. So I know we did talk about this at the development session, but I think it's an interesting point just to go over again, is that how do we make sure that these pockets of learning are not sort of separated from one another, and that regardless of which route it comes in and what it ends up being classified as, we as an organisation are making sure that we are collating and embedding that learning, and I suppose ultimately tracking, you know, assessing ourselves against that. You know, are we fixing the problems? Are we picking that up? So sorry, so a broad question, but I wanted to put it out there. I don't know, Gareth, if you're happy to pick that up.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I think probably I'd like to emphasise that from the learning we've discussed, I think the key to this is the use of our business as usual processes where appropriate, because that should be where learning. So if it's a patient safety related issue that perhaps can be dealt with through, well, I think the first port of call should be through our business as usual, unless it does obviously meet the whistleblowing concerns in terms of public interest test. So that's an element of trying to guide things in the right direction. I think the assurance we need to have as a board is that we are directing into the right governance processes, and then we're reflecting on and closing the loop in each of those governance processes, so that we follow it through. I suppose that's a test for each of our governance streams, and this conversation we'll probably continue to have. The challenge, so there's clinical governance, there's obviously an element of HR in there as well, in terms of what we might learn from HR processes as well. So themes that come through from, if we're guiding things into a HR process as opposed to whistleblowing, what are the themes that we're seeing coming through? And the examples I'd pull out from, again, coming back to the previous paper, work we've done as a board then to reflect on that and address some of those findings would be around early resolution, and work being done to do that. So I suppose it's being able to identify the themes that need systematic improvement. It's being able to respond to things in the moment through existing business as usual processes from a safety perspective or patient or quality perspective, and then being able to close the loop. I think that's the term we're using increasingly, is closing the loop, saying, have we gone through that? The challenge, I suppose, then is making sure we triangulate across. So where do we see patterns? And I think that is where most boards will be at across NHS Scotland, will be that challenge to make sure you do that, you hold the space to be able to triangulate and pick things up across the different governance streams and interconnect them. So I think that's where I'd focus the efforts. I think then in terms of whistleblowing itself, there are clear elements of being able to draw out the recommendations from those whistleblowing incidents. So I think that is, again, I'll put that into the recommendations about how we track through delivering those against those recommendations, and they're more around things that will come out that are organisational as opposed to the individual. We need to do both. So if there's something for the individual we need to do, we need to track that and make sure it happens. We also need, if there's something systemic we need to do, then we'll track it through that as well. So that will be, again, either handled within the whistleblowing construct itself, or we'll make sure they formally hand that over to the right governance stream. I think the last bit I want to focus on is what can we learn from the process of escalation and concerns being raised. So we have a richness of information from our Guardian service, one of which is demonstrating an increasing comfort, I suppose, in some respect, for want of a better word, that the proportion of staff willing to be identified as part of the the Guardian service raising with the line manager has increased over time. So that's a learning in its own right, in terms of saying, well, actually, perhaps people are more comfortable in terms of being able to say, well, they've raised their concern, they're comfortable, it's now facilitated onto their line manager, and they're comfortable they're identified as part of that. I think that's the area we need to continue looking at and observing and understanding. How can we move towards it being more and more usual that people do not feel they have to escalate 1, 2, 3 layers of the organisation to raise an issue, and it gets dealt with appropriately. And some of the outcomes for whistleblowing are where it's escalated quite high, but we still have to go back to the root and say, well, actually, in this circumstance, it's not necessarily a whistleblowing issue. And I suppose that's the bit we need to learn from, is how can we continue that education of managers locally to be able to resolve things, have the conversations, build the confidence that you can go and have the conversation with your line manager, and it might be that the concerns addressed. I think the challenge for us is where there's disagreement and there's not an agreement at that local level, where perhaps people feel they're not being heard or they're not happy with the decision. And that's about, I suppose, managing, on some occasions, managing difficult discussion, difficult conversations. I suppose the way I'd reflect on it is that you might not like the decision that's been made, but if we can, as an organisation, point to the fact we've dealt with it appropriately and effectively, then that's just as good an outcome, because it's resolved locally. So what we want to avoid happening is lots of things getting escalated because people don't like the decision as opposed to how it's been made and the assurance we've made the decision well. So there's a lot in that bit. So I hope that's helped in terms of, I think there's business as usual, how we manage things within business as usual and getting that better. There's learning from whistleblowing and the recommendations with the organisation, and then there's the ongoing learning about how to really get it right at that level with the managers and resolving it at a local level.
Thanks, Gareth. That's really helpful. And I guess just in terms of, again, you're right, we like to use this word, closing the loop, just in terms of being able to get that assurance that we're doing that, that thematic learning, pulling it all in together and then seeing where it's all coming in. I mean, that might be something really interesting to look at in the future. I mean, quite a bit in the future, to see if we're seeing, if there's shift there. Louise, did you want to come in on this off the back of Gareth's bit there?
Yeah, just briefly, I suppose it's just in terms of that closing the loop element, and I think we can broaden that out as well to thinking about how we systematically do that. You said we did with people, so that when there's things being raised in any way, shape or form, we're actually showing that there's an evidence that we've done something differently, or we've actually just acknowledged that there's a challenge there. So I think there's something about articulating that more widely in every opportunity, as well as whistleblowing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Louise. Okay, Susan, I'll bring you next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this report, Gareth. There was one particular thing I just wanted to draw some attention to, and I think that's the importance of us appropriately investing in that investigation resource. You do comment there that that's something that you need to work on, and I think it's crucial that those people have both the skills and the support to be able to be truly forensic in what they're doing, and to be able to even challenge the orthodoxies sometimes, and to know that they've got the backing of the system to do that. Because it's almost, we've been talking about prevention, you know, that getting it right at that point, being able to really identify things properly at that point could make a huge difference to making this a really effective system. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll just come back quickly on that one. I completely agree, and it's one of the things I've already asked my team to look at, a systematic approach to our training and investigatory skills in the broad sense. So there'll be core sets of skills that are used in the process of investigating an HR process, a whistleblowing process, a sensitive clinical governance issue. So what I'm asking for is some, a proposal coming back to saying that building up a bank of senior managers, because typically we need fairly senior managers to manage most of these cases, but build on that. So we've got a bank and we know they've been trained to a certain level, and we've got visibility of that, and that makes it a lot easier. It also helps with the process, because as soon as something comes in, you can also look at what's the capacity to deal with it, who's got an ongoing work case, who's been involved in cases over the last year, so it becomes fair and equitable to, you're not always drawing the same people all the time, but also we can then also make sure we're selecting it from an appropriately independent area within the organisation.
Thanks, Gareth. Sorry, I've got 3 screens. My mouse was all the way over on the other one. Took a while to drag it back across. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments, and obviously the whistleblowing reports get scrutinised in some detail at the Staff Governance Committee as well. So I'm just going to recap. And Gareth, are you happy that I'm doing the 2? Is that, are we good? Right, okay. So just to remind everybody what we've got in our papers, we have our whistleblowing annual report for 22-23 and our Q1 report, so the latest one. So for both of these reports, we are being asked to note the content and also take moderate assurance from them. Is everybody happy with that? Great, thumbs up. Lovely. I'm going to do a slight tweak to the agenda. We're a little bit early, so I'm going to take the draft anchors strategic plan, I can't say it, and then we'll break for lunch. So hang on, we're nearly there, but I want to take this one next, and then you'll get your break on the other side of that, so that you're all nice and fresh for our annual performance reports after lunch. So I'm going to invite, I think David and Lorraine are going to talk to item number 8. I don't know, David, are you intro, then over to Lorraine? I'll let you guys do that.
I'm sure Lorraine can more than easily talk for herself. I'll let her lead off. Thanks, Lorraine.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, David. I think just to point out that this is about the development of the Anchor strategic plan, and just pointing out in the papers itself, it refers to the strategic plan coming here today for review, but it's really about the development of the plan that I'm covering today. So for the board today, we've obviously looked at this commission, and it has to be submitted to Scottish Government on the 27th of October. And we've shaped it really by Together We Care and working jointly with Argyll and Bute in terms of their joint strategic plan. So it really is the coming together of our system to look at how we can communicate that clearly and achieve it over the next 5 years. And there's a really important point that I think we've covered this morning about joint learning. It's been really good to have Argyll and Bute participating in that as well. It will ultimately unite that the strategy through our annual delivery plans, and it will be incorporated from the Q4 update in terms of the overall commission. In terms of the plan itself, there is currently a baseline assessment of indicators looking at the key 6 areas of employment, procurement, environment, sustainability and assets, service design and delivery, which will also incorporate some of the work that we've discussed this morning on prevention and inequalities, being an exemplar anchor institution and community wealth building plan that we're working jointly with the Highland Council on. So currently at the moment, we're completing the templates and making that baseline indicator of what we've currently got in place with a locally assessed score, and that will come together in a medium-term plan that will support the improvement of the scores across each of the areas that I've indicated. So for today, it's to give assurance to the board in terms of developing that anchor strategic plan. We will be looking at the impact of this on the key performance indicators as we develop the plan, and looking importantly at that achievability within the resources that we've currently got, and we will revise the plan accordingly. So in terms of today, we are presenting it today, as I say, in line with the planning process. It will develop. I will present it back probably to the November board because we will have it finally drafted by then. It directly correlates, which I've been clear to point out because I know that it was a concern from the board previously about how we bring everything together. So obviously got Anchor Well and within Together We Care, and it reflects on the Argyll and Bute Joint Strategic Plan. So it will bring together the aspects into the ADP. And we'll keep monitoring progress of the delivery of it through the joint group that's been established, but also report that back to board in November. So thank you, Chair. I'll keep it short and sweet because everyone will be wanting their lunch.
Thanks, Lorraine. Okay, questions, comments. I know, as I said, we haven't got the plan, but this is about how we're doing the plan. Tim, I'll bring you in.
Yeah, just a quick comment to emphasise the importance of the work. I think we need to recognise it's a lot more than just filling in the report and saying this is what we do, that there are lots of connections to the anchor work, to the overall work of the board, but also, for example, to things that we've talked about earlier on. When we talk about employment, it links with things like employing care experienced young people, and about making sure that the local economy is appropriately developed. When we talk about procurement, it can be things like procuring local food, which gets back to comments made about obesity and good nutrition. And it relates a lot to many of the performance indicators that we got. Sometimes we forget what an important local employer we are in different communities. So it's something that we really need to stress the importance of.
Thanks, Tim. I suppose actually you've just made me think of a question that came to my mind when I was reading it. And sorry, Graham, I'm Chair's prerogative. I'm just jumping in there before you. It was almost why it's being done in this way, because I suppose you're right. I think that anchoring sits across everything that we do, and I suppose there were parts of, when I was reading the covering paper, obviously we haven't got the plan yet, but I was reading that it sits so well in the integrated space and really does touch on everything we do. And it was interesting that this is the way it's being taken forward, as opposed to embedding that ethos into our other many plans that we have. And I realise that it's not us that's made that decision, but I am interested to hear, and I can see that Lorraine's put her hands up, which is great. Interested to hear how we're kind of managing that, given that it is not, it's not our choice to create it as a separate plan, but recognising that it is part of what we already do. Thanks, Lorraine.
Yeah, I think it's given us the focus for a really important piece of work, and does emphasise what Tim has said about the priority of it. At Directors of Planning, we have, I guess, challenged the plethora of plans and the areas that we have to come back on, because it is a challenge if you look at across the system at the different policy and plans and submissions that we've got to make. I hope that the approach that we're taking, and thank you, Tim, for getting into the detail of it, is to embed that within, you know, the really good work that Fiona's doing with Argyll and Bute strategic plan and Together We Care. And we were lucky that when we looked across, we both had that anchor institutions as a key part of our development. So I guess it just, for me, brings that together, but it's important that we do feed that through the annual delivery plan process, but make sure that it's got the priority. But I agree with your concerns about how we embed that kind of overall approach for the board so that it's simple and clear in our priorities.
Thanks, Lorraine. I did kind of give you a question that wasn't really one that could be easily answered. I do apologise, Graham. I will bring you in now.
That's all right, because I was partly just going to echo what Tim had said, and because I do think it's really important. I know you've got this process now to do the big strategic plan, but it's how we take that down, and I think not just to our partnership levels, but to things like, you know, the smaller community anchor organisations, because if we're going to make any progress on preventative, probably in particular, then it's going to be at that local small scale level, who most of whom, much as our plans are wonderful, most of whom these small local organisations ain't going to be that interested in the grand master plans, but will be wanting to work out what they can do in their community. So I look forward to us being able to really kind of translate and interpret it and look at its applicability at the local implementation level.
Thanks, Graham. I'm sure we would all agree. Don't know that anybody wants to come back on that particularly. I'll bring in Gareth, please. Sorry, Gareth, maybe you were coming back on something.
No, that's fine. I suppose just echoing other points that have been made, but there are opportunities for us to look not just in integrated space, but us as an employer generally. So there's an element of pulling that out. And I think, to use a glib term, I think it's about boxing clever here in relation to the I suppose tendency for government colleagues in the planning space to request yet another template to fill in, and it's embedding it in what we currently is, just drawing out really examples of where we're doing it elsewhere. So it's just to note that I think it's really helpful that Lorraine and the team are doing that for us, because it's taking a little bit of a job off our hands to not just to not reinvent the wheel. But one of the areas I do want to pick up, and I'm picking up, will be around our employability. And I think just articulating that, because loads of stuff happening, it's just about articulating it. And I think really as a board, what we're trying to do is provide assurance that we're aware of the agenda, we're addressing the agenda in a multitude of different ways, and we can give case studies and vignettes around that, which I think as a part of then board reflection is saying, does that tell us anything about the gaps and where the gaps are for us that we need to address, which is probably more of the intent rather than going through for us, I think, rather than going through a checklist that's maybe drawn up by others that saying doing X, Y, Z. So employability will be something to come back to, and I want to bring that back through the board in due course.
Thanks, Gareth. Lorraine, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I just think that gap analysis is really important. And somebody said success earlier. Do you know, it will allow us to showcase what we are doing well through this approach, but then allow us to look at the gaps and where we need to improve. So it does give us that framework to do that and to give assurance to the board.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, Alistair, please.
Yeah, thanks. I think this is a very important plan that we're looking to develop here. However, I've slight concern that we've got the council is also developing a community wealth building strategy, and it seems that almost typical of many organisations. We've got 2 silo organisations working to develop very similar strategies that will address employability, workforce planning, future sustainability, building capacity within communities. And I know there's reference, Lorraine, in the report to the community planning partnership, but it strikes me that we also got a deadline to produce our report, and the council's producing its report, but the community planning partnership should really take ownership of this and then look to take the various reports that are being done for government to try to fuse them into a Highland offering that might help address things like depopulation of young people from the Highlands, about trying to increase inward investment to the Highlands, trying to increase recruitment and employability activities. But I think that's something that the Community Planning Partnership Board could probably take ownership of with their Chief Officer group to progress. But it just seemed a lot of similar resource will be expended on this by staff in Glenurquhart Road as well as Asland House, probably investigating, researching, deliberating over the same thing. And it probably isn't too late to hook in with them, because I think the council started in June on this. But I think my ask is that, I don't know, Pam, I think you sit on the Community Planning Partnership Board and on the Chief Officers Group, but I think it'd be a really good item to get onto their agenda for them to take forward this after we've all produced the reports and tailor something that's specific for the Highlands. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair, and lots of people would like to answer your question. So I'm going to go to Lorraine first, and I'll dot around. Maybe Pam, I'll finish with you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's a really important point that we have acknowledged in the draft plan that is started about how we integrate and work together, especially with the latter about community wealth building, because there's no point in duplicating effort, as you say. They have prioritised some areas that they want us to respond on, but they have acknowledged that there are areas which will take longer to do, and that is one of them. So we do need to work in that space to develop it jointly, and we have commenced that work now that I'm back in this post to do that piece. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Fiona, I'll bring you in next, and then Gareth.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose it's a similar point. I wanted to very much welcome this report coming to the board today, because this is such a critical and pressing issue for us in our local areas. But I suppose I wanted to concur with the point that, you know, as a public body, we have to meet our duties and expectations that are given to us and our accountabilities. But the prize is about people, and it's about place. And for us, you know, this duty applies to you know, all public bodies, but for us in Highlands and in Argyll and Bute, that the mission, if you like, is so much more imminent and clear in terms of the risks if we don't succeed in meeting all of our combined duties to act as anchors. And I suppose from an Argyll and Bute point of view, maybe it's even more imminent than it is within the Highland area, although I would recognise that the demographic challenge in Highland is not evenly spread out across the locality areas within Highland. So there are areas that are growing, but areas that certainly aren't, and they're probably very similar demographically to what we see in Argyll and Bute, where it's our more remote and rural areas that really are experiencing that higher degree of challenge. So for me, I think it's important that as an NHS body, we recognise our responsibilities, but that we discharge them in an integrated community planning or shared space, because our staff are at the front line, in my experience, and I would count myself among them. We don't start our careers in one part of health and social care and stick in them forever. So as a teenager, I worked in social care and then went on to train to be a nurse, and have had my career predominantly within the NHS, but now working in a very integrated arrangement. So we move, you know, as individuals between these employer states, particularly I would suggest in health and social care. So I think that combined working strengthens our plan as an NHS board, but we do, as others have said, need to ensure that we minimise the risk of any duplication, because really with this challenges we face, it's all hands to the pump, and we need to be working very hard to be these supports to the sustainability of our population and community.
Thank you, Fiona. Gareth, I'll bring you in next, and then Pam to close.
Yeah, I think it's also important that we acknowledge there's the integrated space and the formal structure we have in that relationship. But there's also the relationships between the executive teams, I think, within the public bodies as well, which I think particularly when we think about the acute sector in North Highland, which is not in that integrated space, then the example I would pull out would be a conversation that happened as party to in Belford when we were talking about workforce, and they were highlighting the links locally with the regeneration plan for Fort William, which I think is called, I can't remember what it's called, something like Fort William 2040. So that for me is about us being more aware of not sitting in our own silo in terms of thinking about just about what health needs and what we need from a health perspective, but think about actually what are the plans. And I mentioned this at a meeting we had the other day around awareness and understanding of what the council's plans are around economic generation, what influence that might have on population growing, shrinking, where they're targeting it, how that might then change our workforce market locally. So I think that's more about the relationships, as Fiona was saying. It's about relationships between public sector bodies as well, and being on the right forums. So that led to a conversation as a really practical demonstration of linking up somebody in Fort William from DWP with somebody in the recruitment team that's working on workforce. So I think it's about how we make the connections as well on a practical day-to-day basis, as well as the sort of strategic work.
Thanks, Gareth. And Pam.
Yeah, I think it's all probably been said, to be honest. I would just wholly endorse everything that Alistair said. I think that is absolutely the direction of travel. We also should absolutely not, our plan should be for the people of the Highlands and improving the Highlands. And at the same time, we can easily meet the duties of what's required centrally to meet that kind of the requirements they have. But we shouldn't keep that as the driver. We are responsible for the health and care and our contribution within the Highlands, so we should keep all our focus on that. I have a meeting coming up with Gail Prince Alistair, so in terms of the agendas around community planning and that, so it's probably a pretty good timing. So I'll touch base with you, Lorraine, and we'll pick that up, because it's a great example. Just for reassurance, I meet with the chief execs of the wider public bodies in the Highlands, and obviously I have different arrangements with Pippa and Fiona and Argyll and Bute. And we already have got some collective pieces of work being looked at to try and strengthen those relationships, economies of scale, how do we work better together? So it's all along the same themes, but we'll pick that one up and just endorse everything that Alistair said. That is absolutely how we should be working.
Thank you. Okay, so we are being asked to take substantial assurance from what we've seen. It's not the plan, but it's our approach to the plan, and we look forward to seeing the plan in due course once it's been finalised. And I think that was some really good points made there. So Lorraine and colleagues, we look forward to hearing how that progresses, and indeed how we're working across that partnership space, and how we're going to be embedding that and drawing out the good stuff that's already happening. Okay, so sorry to have jigged around the agenda and delayed you for your lunch a little bit. Let's just take just over the half an hour. So see you back here at 22.